This is my audience here. Hello, my name is Lucy Latorre. My historical speech is I Have a Dream by Martin Luther King at the steps of the Lincoln Memorial in the Washington March on August 28, 1963. I'm happy to join with you today what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. 50 years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand in today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon of light in hopes to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro is still not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languished in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. And so we've come here today to dramatize a shameful condition. In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note into which every American was to fall here. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed unalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring the sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check that has come to be marked with insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the blank of justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there is insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity in this nation. And so we've come to cash this check, a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and security of justice. Martin Luther King's speech was able to highlight the nation's failure to keep the founding promise of America: freedom, equality, and justice to all. He reminds us that all includes white men as well as black men. Martin Luther King compares America's faulty promise to a bad check with insufficient funds. This comparison was able to depict the peaceful manner of, but instead he gave us a bad check. He brings us hope into America's promise. He says he refused to believe that the vault was empty, signifying that America had a chance to redeem itself. He hoped to open the eyes of all Americans to treat each other as equals and to cash the check that will give them the riches of freedom and security and justice. People of color were given equal rights, but not allowed to do the same things as white Americans. Just like a bad check, you're given the check, but unable to get any money out of it. The reality no one wanted to hear. Many hoped for colored communities to basically take a chill pill and forget about it, return to normal activities. The courage that Martin Luther King had in 1963 to stand up peacefully, but firmly, and call out the injustices is beyond. It shows what a true leader Martin Luther King was. He truly influenced America's change and its ways for better. For one, as a person of color, without Martin Luther King's speech and his influence, I myself would probably not have been part of today's classroom. I Have a Dream is part of today's America and the land of the free. Thank you.